Hello, my name is Ronan, and this is the Successful Mentalist podcast. Welcome.
Oh, this is so amazing. Hello and welcome, everybody. We are up for a fantastic conversation today. Now, if you're not familiar with Ronan, I'm going to kind of let his energy do the talking here, because this man is an absolute beast. I've followed his work for quite a while now. Through specifically the Mindvalley platform, but this man is an absolute genius. He knows his stuff, and honestly, being able to pin him down for a conversation today is just so exciting. So, Ronan, thank you so much for being here. This is so awesome.
Aidan, it's a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for opening the space. It's a pleasure for me to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Someone on the platform.
Well, for those who don't actually know you, Ronan, could you give us a little sort of an 80-20 on who you are, what you do, what your background is, just so people can hit the ground running as we get into this conversation?
Of course. So I am originally from Brazil, and if you hear any weird word, it's probably something that I made up on the spot. The accent may be a little thick to understand as well. So this is where it's coming from. I'm now living in Estonia, and I am an author in the health and fitness space. Most of my work is published by Mindvalley. I work as an athlete before. I was a former athlete for obstacle circuit racing. So this is a kind of a little masochist type of sport that you run a half of a marathon in the middle of a forest with obstacles. You may have heard of, Spartan races and all those Tough Mudder and all those kind of things. So I used to compete on those things. You run up a hill carrying a boulder and then climb a rope and crawl under barbed wire. And that's more or less how people have fun there. And that whole path led me to understand or to get that curiosity of what is it that the human body can do. I was coming back from a background of a lot of health issues since I was a little kid. I had digestive issues, and I had immune system issues. I would get sick every year, at least twice in a year, that you can't get off bed, and chronic constipation. I go to the bathroom once in a week, and that was my life story for like 20 years, and all the things that come with that. And so I needed to find ways to I was in a place that I was either abandoning, say, hey, my physical body is a failure, maybe in the next life, or I could take some attitude and say, what can I do to see if I can improve that state and then just feel a little bit better. And once I started digging into the science of the human body and going deep into that information, I developed this passion because I realized that my body could completely change if I also paid more attention to what it needed and to what it wanted. And so this is when I started resolving all those problems and competing as an athlete. And because I went, far in that journey, eventually there were people asking me tips. Hey, how do you do that? Can you help me on a nutrition plan? Can you help me on a training regimen? I want to achieve the same result. How do you do? And then that led me to become a coach. And from then on, I started developing programs that can take people online, wherever they are, into a journey of improving the way that they relate to their bodies, the way they understand their bodies, and the way that they experience what it is like to be inside of a human body.
Wonderful. There's so many things there. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you on straight away of just something you said, like, you've gone through this change, you've got into kind of looking after your health and going further and looking into like human potential, but it all started with you having a few problems when you were younger. And I know, Ronan, that so many people just kind of look at their situation, whether they're riddled with mental like health problems, whether they're riddled with like physical problems, and they just kind of sit on it and be like, oh, that's the hand I'm dealt, and they don't take any action going forward. Like, why did you decide to just suddenly take action and make a change? Because I know it can be so hard for people to actually take that first step and start actually doing it.
To me, I had, I would love to answer this question to you and say, one day I felt inspired and I think I deserved a better health and life and came from this beautiful place. But it was not. My whole journey of striving for better health and better fitness didn't come from inspiration. It came from desperation. It was more coming from the dark side of the force. And so the way that there's an episode that triggered a lot of this pursuit to me. That this happened when I was a kid and I was in the elementary school. I was probably 8 years old or something around that age. And coming from Brazil, you have two types of kids. The kids that are good in soccer and the kids that are horrible. And I belonged to the horrible part, right? And so I never got many good experiences out of because of this situation. There's always the bullying. There's always the feeling left out because every single physical education class is playing soccer, and then every single Wednesday at 9:30 a.m. you are there feeling less of a human being because you're the last to be picked. You are the ones that people laugh at and all these kind of things. And so there was a lot of this feeling of unfairness. This is not something that I chose. My body is a small body, is a weak body, and it has a lot of issues, and it's unfair. And then I remember that there was one thing that I was good at when it comes to the physical body, that my body was super flexible. And I did martial arts when I was a little kid as well. And so I could, stretch. And one day, I had a physical education class that on one day that was not a soccer class, it was a stretch or a flexibility assessment. So the teacher put all the kids together and you sit down with your legs stretched and you try to reach your toes. And so I could do this. But all the cool guys, the cool kids, they were also the best at soccer because they are sprinting all the time. Their hamstrings are very stiff, so they cannot reach their toes. So the cool kids were there, and they were feeling like less of a boy because of that. And I went there, and I managed to reach my toes. And the teacher was assessing the position that I was holding there. And then come one of these guys that was the cool kid at the time. And when I was there stretching, he reaching my toes, he came to me and to my teacher. And he said, the teacher, he can do this because he's short. So his legs are short. And that was a joke that I heard all the time. I was the shortest and the skinniest kid at school. Yeah, I looked at him like just logically. There was no emotion or no feeling to it. I said, yeah, my legs are short. But my arms are also short, they're proportional. And then this guy called Jeff, he slapped me at the back of my head. And then he said, you shut up, you're a piece of shit. And I shut up. I kept my head down. I didn't look at him. The teacher didn't do anything. And things stayed that way. And for years, I even forgot of the episode because it made me feel weak. It made me feel less of a human being. And many years later was when I was able to recall that episode and face it for what it was. But what that gave me was a little bit of that rage to say I'm going to prove others that I'm not a weak piece of shit. And I think at that time, the only way that I knew how to do this was to build a body that looked strong. And at that time, I watched Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I said, that's a strong, this is not a weak piece of shit. So this is probably what I have to do. And so that was this lingering, or this dormant motivation to prove others for an external validation. I was strong, and I needed to look stronger, to build a body that was strong. Being a kid, that was the only way that I knew how to navigate that situation. So that triggered a lot of my pursuits in health and fitness. Was this place of desperation. I don't feel whole, I don't feel confident, I don't feel strong, and I'll outsource, I'll command my body to give that to me. And that led this whole journey with a lot of fire, with a lot of passion, but with a lot of self-destruction too. Because when you place your health in your body and you assign your body to give you to fulfill a unmet need that you have, you can be very self-destructive and abuse your health and your well-being to get there. So that was this next stretch of the journey, was going so far into the athleticism, going so far into building a body that looked strong that things broke. And that I needed to go back there many years later and come into peace in realizing that I was a strong human being, and I didn't need to prove that with the way that my body looked or performed, so that I could feel in a more whole way. But back to your question, actually, it was what gave me the motivation to start paying attention and saying, hey, I need to change something about my body and my health, was the feeling of desperation. I feel a less of a human being. There was this very bad feeling that I felt I need to compensate for. And for a lot of us, this is what gets us started. It's not what maintains us in the journey, but it's what triggers the pursuit.
I love that. I think this connects to something that I think I first heard Stephen Kotler talking about. There's this idea that peak performers, they usually have something that they're running to or they're running from. And what I've noticed is that a lot of people, especially in the health space, tend to be running from something, whether that's just like hitting like rock bottom on a physical level or an emotional level or mental level, like those that you've described there. It's a really interesting overlap to hear. And what I particularly love is the fact that you've said that you did this, you went on this journey and this to build the body that you thought would give you everything, and realized that there was a missing piece of that puzzle, and that actually comes from the actual person that you are being, the mental element of that. So what was that sort of transition like as you sort of moved towards the I don't know what the right word here is, but I'm going to say mental awareness in the hope that lands in the right way.
So this came from many years later, after the episode when I was a child, when my parents didn't allow me to. I wanted to go to the gym like straight away from when I was a kid, because I wanted to be a Conan the Barbarian. My parents never allowed me because I was a short kid, and they had the belief that if you lift weights, it stunts your growth, which is not true. But that's what the belief was. So I needed to wait until I was 18 to go to the gym. And I was counting the days to turn 18 and start training my body. And that happened. And then I went to the gym. I did what everyone was doing. I ate what people were eating in the gym, training the way that everyone was training, and nothing happened. And my body just seemed not to respond to those, to what everyone else was doing. And then once more, I felt, this is so unfair. I was looking at my body and asking, why do you do this to me? I'm here showing up. And this is when I started looking into the science. I said, it's not that perhaps it's not that my body will not respond. Perhaps it's just the case that I need to find the right way. I was a really good student at that time, so I applied my strength as a student seeing science, what would give me an insight. And then my body started to respond sometime later. And this is when I started, okay, now I can get stronger. Now I can get bigger. Now I can do all these things, and started competing. And then I said, now is when I'll become Conan the Barbarian. But the problem is that my body doesn't have the frame, doesn't have the genetics to be Conan the Barbarian. And it was forcing it into being. And one day I decided I would do a whole fitness, when you do a bodybuilding competition, that it gets to this very big and lean state, that you see veins everywhere and you see a very impressive muscle definition. I said, I'm going to do this. And this will be my Conan the Barbarian achievement. And so I needed to force my body into being something that was not designed to be. And it was a whole project of 2.5 years that I needed to, for the first half, the first leg of this 2.5 years, I needed to train 6 times in a week, twice in a day, go to the gym in the morning, then go to the gym in the evening, and train myself to exhaustion every single day of the 6 days in a week, and then overfeed my body on top of that. So you need to eat more. You need to eat so much that eating becomes the hardest part of this whole training. And so for this first maybe 1.5 years almost, you're there just pushing your body to the furthest it can go, if overfeeding and feeling stuff all the time. And then for the other half, you need to do the opposite. You need to underfeed and starve all this time, and then just think about food, and then you're there manipulating different variables so your body gets into that illusion that it is that Instagram type of look, right? And when I got there, I had a day that I had a photo shoot. I've done a couple of fitness photo shoots, and that was my first one. So I did a lot of pictures and things like that. And the interesting thing was I felt so miserable my body was so tired and such an unhealthy state that there I was in my impersonation of Conan the Barbarian, feeling that everything that I could think about was to get some sleep and spend a weekend eating nonstop without anyone looking. I couldn't even appreciate those 2.5 years of, hey, I finally achieved that goal. There was no feelings about it. There was just a feeling, can I just go and eat until there, as if there's no tomorrow. And that's what I did after the whole photo shoot finished. And my body was accumulating so much inflammation from all that overtraining and then overeating and then undereating and all the abuse, that in 1 week, the week after, I gained around 7 kilos. So this is more or less 15 pounds in 1 week. And that was all from a lot of inflammation and fluid retention. Because when your body is inflamed, it holds a lot of water. So my face was big, and people were looking and asking, what happened? And my body was just trying to gather resources to heal because it had been overused for all this time. And this is when I looked at my body and I asked it again, hey, why do you do this to me? Why is this so hard for me? And I realized that my body was just showing up for me the best it could for everything that I was doing. It was more my way of feeling I don't feel complete, I don't feel strong, I don't feel confident, and then assigning my body to fulfill an unmet need. And so on that day after those, I stepped on a scale, I was feeling as if I had an accident or something, and said that and realized how much my body was desperate, trying to gather resources to heal, that I had had a conversation with my body. It feels very weird now if you talk about it, but it's one of the practices that I teach a lot of my students, that I call body talk. At that time, I didn't know what I was doing, just felt intuitive. And I said, hey, you've been showing up for me all these years, since the very beginning. And I never paid attention to what you needed and to what you wanted. I always paid attention to what I wanted, to what I needed, and I told you to give it to me. And I abused it. I was absent for the first half of my life. I was abusive in the other half up until now. And here you are showing up and, still making me feel alive. And from now on, what I want is to not manipulate you so I can feel happy and fulfilled, but to work on this mental aspect, as you said. If you feel the fulfillment and the worthy of the human being that I am, and allowing you to express your full potential as a byproduct of that. I want to more pay attention to what you want, to what you need, and provide that to you instead of manipulating you to fulfill an unmet need. And with that conversation, I felt my mindset shifting. And then from there on, I realized that me and my physical body, we are different things. My body is part of who I am, but it has its own needs and it has its own wants as well. And I am in a synergistic connection with nature by being a human body. And so the best that I can do is to understand, what is it that my body needs? What is it that my body wants to become? How can I provide it? And as in exchange, it gives me all the experiences and all the possibilities that I can express in my life as being a creative human being. And I think that applies not only for fitness and health aspects, but for anything that we do in any profession or any area of our life. It's maximized once your body can it has its needs met and can provide you the whole chemical combination that makes you enjoy and be present in the moments, whatever it is that you are doing. So I think that was the main. It's a long story to tell the shift that happened to being more conscious with my own body.
There's so much to unpack here, Ronan. There's so much information and gold within the individual things that you've said. And you mentioned kind of any profession at the end of what you're saying there. And I want to link this round into our profession, into entertainment. And there's a lot of people out there who think that, it's hard work. They're under that impression that of what you were, to be able to go up to a certain level in fitness, you've got to just put in so many hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and overwork, and they're just like, oh no, I can't be bothered to do that. I don't want to do that. And as you've said, you don't need to do that, guys. And then there's other people out there who they find it difficult to take any action and keep themselves healthy. And, like I was saying off the podcast, we live in our community, and our community within entertainment, it can be one of really the unhealthiest, I think, out there, both mentally and physically. And I'm really curious, based on everything you've said in the podcast so far, bearing in mind the entertainment industry, bearing in mind people feeling like they can't fit the health in, feeling like sometimes they're overworking, or just feeling like they just can't do it, they're unmotivated or whatever. What do you think the easiest way for someone to take action is, and start looking after their body in the right way, and start just being a little bit more happier overall? I know it's kind of a big question, but I'm just kind of curious to get your viewpoint on that.
Beautiful. I think the main, the first step is always a step of awareness. Because I can't say, hey, everyone should intermittent fast, or everyone should, eat less carbohydrates or more carbohydrates. These steps can be the best step for one person, but not the first step perhaps for another person. And so I think the point of agency is the most important. Is awareness of your current state, and the consultation with the wisdom of your body to see what your next step is. You know, the best news about all of this is that the first steps, and not only the first step, but perhaps all the steps that we will ever need to create a state of health and a solid foundation, is something that is not new to anybody. It's those type of things that our grandparents already told us, and it's those type of things that we pick on our parents whenever they are old and we feel bitter towards them. Whenever you make a criticism about your parents, you know that this probably is a important health step. Are you eating the chips again when you should eat more fiber? Or are you spending a whole night without sleeping? Whenever you pick on your parents, pay attention to what is it that you pick on. It's very likely it's a very good advice for yourself as well. But what I mean is this: when I start working with someone, I usually go through a step of one. The first question is from 1 to 10, how likely you think you are to reaching the age of 85 or longer. This is the first step, a first question that helps someone reflect about their current state, but in a subjective way. You're not taking a look about what you eat, how you exercise. Okay, if my life stays as it is, my lifestyle stays as it is, what does my intuition says about how long my life is going to be? And it turns out that this question is scientifically very accurate, and this is called the self-reported health span. So when you have different studies that are following people through decades, they get people in different stages of their life and different health states, and they do a lot of blood tests and biomarkers, and they bring these people to doctors that come up with all sorts of technical diagnoses and put this information together and try to predict their lifespan. But they also ask these people, what do you think your lifespan is going to be, or how likely you are to turn 85 or longer? And then they follow these people for decades. And after 10, 15, or 20 years, they see who is still breathing. And it turns out that the self-rated health span is often more accurate than what a doctor or a blood test says about your own health state. Often people who say, I am going to live until this age, they are more accurate than a lot of exams that are put together. So this is how the conversation starts for the awareness. And so that helps you identify, hey, I am maybe in a really good place, at least for what I believe. I have a lot of habits and a lot of practices that I know they are keeping my body healthy and living a long life. Or if you think honestly about this, my lifestyle doesn't change, you may see, hey, I'm really a red light here. This is the first question. Then the good news is that this is all reversible and the body is very forgiving. So that's the second question is, what is something that you think you should start doing or stop doing if you wanted to live longer and better? And this question is the question that brings us back to what we pick on our parents, what we heard from our grandparents, and usually reveals your next step or your first step, because it draws attention to your current state and into basic things. It will not be, if I really think honestly, what is something that I think I should start doing or stop doing to live longer and better? The answer is rarely going to be supplementing with B12 vitamins and, red light therapy. It'll be more sleeping a little bit more, stressing a little bit less, or eating a little bit more of whole foods or nutritional foods. In all the foundation of good health and body performance and longevity is based on these big blocks. Is sleeping well and enough, eating whole foods, creating states of inner stillness, exercising more often, moving a little bit more. So usually this question reveals for you what the next step should be. Then the third question, which is the one that I found the juiciest, is if you know that this is the main action point that can extend your life, make you live better, feel better, and live for longer, why hasn't it happened yet? I think this is the question that we really want to work on. Because if you say, hey, for you to extend your life, you should sleep a little bit more or exercise a bit more often. Everyone say, yeah, I know that already. But if I'm investigating the question why it hasn't happened yet, not from a confrontational perspective, this question is not meant to make people feel bad about it, but from a investigative perspective. So, okay, why? What is the reason that I know that this is probably what is going to extend my life? And now I know that I'm very accurate in my own intuitive feeling. What are the reasons that this hasn't happened yet? There is usually a pattern, and there is usually a belief behind the pattern that holds our healthy habits where they are. And then addressing those things is what opens the space for a new sense of identity and therefore a new habit that then allows you to put in practice that step that I already know you should be applying. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, this makes so much sense. This screams so true of so many conversations that even we've been having with people on the subject of health. It's like where for context, Ronan, we did a while back, we did a couple of 30-day biohacking challenges. Our first was literally on the subject of sleep, helping people to get better sleep. And truth be told, because we'd never spoken about it in that format before, we had loads of people turn up to the first session. And then when they realized that, oh, this isn't anything new, like in the sense of it they knew that they needed to get better sleep, like the attendance very sharply, and I don't mind sharing this, it very sharply dropped off because people were expecting something new and exciting and novel. And the truth is, like as you've said, it's really the fundamentals of like, what's that first step? Why hasn't that first step happened yet? And then removing all of the mindsets, shifting the beliefs actually around that, and then taking action from there. I love how specific this can be. And more importantly, how practical this can be to anybody. Like, as you was talking, my mind's already racing on a bunch of different things here, which is great. I'm hugely in love with this information right now. And from from here, where this leads is once I know of any basic and foundational step that is already not new to me, I like to talk about around 7 main lifestyle needs. That are those lifestyle needs that we don't know that we already know that they are fundamental. And these are things like frequent movement, moving your body physically more often. This is one of the reasons that while I'm here in conversation with you guys, I'm also walking, for example. Then sound sleep, which means enough sleep and sleep with good quality in a regular schedule as much as possible. Even though when you work with entertainment, it works like a shift work, right? Because your performance is usually in the evening, but for the most part, whenever you can have that structure in a regular schedule, that's what you aim for. And then eating more whole foods and giving more space for whole foods and less space for hollow foods that I like to call the foods that give you
that give you space, occupy space in your stomach, but not so much nutrients to your body. And we know what we're talking about, all the packaged foods and things like that. Some other of the lifestyle needs will be creating more inner stillness. So whether by practices of mindfulness that creates a more grounded or unshakable nervous system, or by eliminating the triggers of your stress to begin with. So if I have a relationship with a coworker or something that a routine that is always causing me stress, or every day I open my internet browser to see what is happening with COVID in the world, and then I get super pissed about it. Maybe I should not do this anymore, or remove some triggers, and things like that. And then I have sync with nature, more time with community, and close connections with other people. Things like that are basic, that we already know. Then when we are looking to why is it that is not happening yet, then what I have found is there are some archetypes. There are some patterns and beliefs that usually repeat. I found at least 8 of them that I list down when I'm coaching someone, or when I'm certifying my coaches, we are working with those 8 patterns, 8 archetypes. There is more as well, for sure. But you find some stories like this. So there's one type of story that I call my struggle is my gift. So this is a person who knows what they need to do. Okay, I know that I should sleep maybe a little bit better, or a little bit more, or eat maybe a little bit more whole foods. But they only take action in case of desperation. Now, they only take action when things are really going down. They went to the doctor, and the doctor said, hey, you're going to die in 2 days if you don't change. Or they had someone in their family who just passed away, and now they are afraid, or someone came to them and said, hey, if you don't change right now, things are going to be really bad. And they start taking action. So, okay, I'm going to eat better food or sleep a little bit more. And then they start feeling a little bit better. And when they feel a little bit better, they let it go again until they are feeling desperate once more. And I worked with one lady, for example, that had this pattern. The pattern is, I only take action when I'm desperate, and when I start to feel good, I let it go. And the belief that needs to happen, then you ask, okay, this is the pattern. Now, what does someone need to believe in order to have this behavior? Try not to judge your own case. Now, put this in the third person. What does someone need to believe in order to act in this way? And for this type of archetype, you need to believe that having a problem is a good thing, right? That being in a state of crisis is a good thing. Otherwise, you wouldn't do that. That state of crisis is serving you somehow. And so there is one lady that I worked with called Maya. And Maya, when she was a kid, she went through a very serious case of sexual abuse. And fortunately, she had a lot of support from family and friends to overcome that and heal the entire process. But she experienced that when she was very young to understand what was happening in life. And what she saw was she had this tremendous crisis, and then the community gathered around her to give her love and support and help her overcome that. Unconsciously, what she realized that she had learned without, unbeknownst to her and without her conscious choice, was that when I have a crisis, people come and offer me love and support. And what can happen from there is that belief that maybe what happens if I don't have a crisis? Will I not receive love and support? And unconsciously, that was the pattern. And so whenever she was feeling good in her health, she would unconsciously let that go, because whenever she had this episode that she was in the hospital for 2 days and the doctor said, you're about to die, should have an emotional breakdown, and all the friends and family would come and support her. And so for a situation when you find a belief, and this is only one of the different 8 different archetypes, but here's the thing, when you find a belief that is supporting this type of pattern, then you realize that this whole game of health and longevity is not about eating less carbohydrates or eating more broccoli or going to bed a little earlier. It's about addressing the belief that is holding the old self of identity and being able to acknowledge that you supported and protect me one day. Now I am strong enough to do this on my own. Your duty is here complete, and coming to terms with that part of yourself that then allows you to create a new sense of identity that has the habits that you want to implement. So this is more or less how you navigate the whole habit change to create a healthy habit lifestyle. It's finding out, if I propose myself to do this thing that I know my next step is, let's say, eat more whole foods or exercise a little bit more. If I propose myself to do this, I know I am going to fail because. What is this because? In my previous attempts, I know that I gave up, or I didn't even try, or I felt intimidated, or whatnot. What is the pattern that happens? And then asking yourself, what does someone need to believe in order to act that way? And finding what is the belief there and how the belief served you before, so you can acknowledge and let it go. I think that's the deep work of saying, I'm going to eat more broccoli. You know what I mean?
That makes so much sense. So to just recap some of the things that you've shared, that this process of self-awareness, which is the most important step, right? This is the game, as you said. This is the point in the game, not to just be healthy. It's to do it for this innate reason. So actually find out right now that ask yourself the question of, right now, with your current lifestyle and your current habits and your current situation, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to live to 85 plus, and actually use that as a deciding factor? From there, ask yourself the question, like, what is something that you should either start doing or stop doing in order to live longer, and get that initial idea in place, and then dive into the question of why hasn't that happened yet, looking at the belief systems and shifting the identity over to formulate the new habits in order to have that thing start or stop that specific behavior, that specific routine, or whatever it might be, in order to become healthier and live longer. Is that a fair summary of this?
That's a fair summary. That you nailed this. And this work will happen in parallel with the implementation of this new habit, right? Because this is if you start reflecting on these things, you may not get an answer in the first 5 minutes that you sit down and think about these things. So you may get caught in the loop. Okay, I'm going to do all my own self-therapy here for 6 months, and then I'll start eating more broccoli. And that's not the idea. The idea, okay, I identify the next step. And as I am working on implementing this next step, I'm starting to feel all the resistances, all the reasons, all the stories that I tell myself why this is not going to work. And so this is feeding the understanding the pattern, understanding the belief that is holding that pattern, and creating the space for you to resolve that and shifting your sense of identity. As you are trying to implement the habit or the next step, whether it is sleeping a little more, eating more whole foods, moving a little bit more often, drinking a little bit more water, or spending more time in nature or whatnot. So these two things are working together because one is a short-term solution and the other is a long-term solution, but they feed back onto each other. And the result is that this is how you turn a piece of broccoli into personal transformation, right? that's the magic. It's not, okay, the one thing is getting the habit of eating more vegetables, and the other is unraveling all the things that are within yourself and realizing that, hey, I can actualize myself as a human being by taking this to as deep as it goes. Not only will be easier for me to live a longer and better life, then my body is here showing up for me for whatever I want to do for more time. But also I am becoming a better person. I'm becoming a person that feels more whole and feel more fulfilled.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing. And I really hope, people act on this, because being more fulfilled, just being that better person overall and feeling great, let's be honest, when I spend days and days and days at my computer, just sat down like a slug, going away and typing, it feels horrible, and I don't feel like I've got that energy, and I just feel a little bit weaker and unhappy with myself. But the moment I go out for a walk, the moment I go out and maybe do some exercise or lift some weights or whatever, I feel fantastic with myself, and that is a beautiful place to be. But it can just be hard to start, and I'm going to be honest, with this episode today, with what you've been saying, it is so inspiring, and I really hope people take the information on this and find their own inspiration and their own thoughts to push them forward, because, I always say that health is a necessity all around. Like, at the end of the day, no one wants to die young, but especially in the entertainment industry, like I mentioned earlier, it's typically one of the most unhealthiest industries. But when we start looking into health and start actually being a better person and just like being a little bit happier overall and having more of that energy that comes across in our performances, we can show up, we can be better, we can make better business decisions, we can be happier when performing, we've got so much more energy when performing, and therefore, like, just by getting on top of health and just by doing a little bit of work there, we can actually do better shows and be better at the business stuff. And it goes hand in hand. You want to be better at performing? Well, health can really help with that. So I really hope, from what you've said today, Ronan, people, take a little bit of action and find inspiration in what you've said, because I know I have personally.
When you say this, what comes to me is just a moment of reflection about what a better state, mind-body state, can do to remove most of the struggles that you have with your job. I work with there's a lot of creative work in what I do. I think this is how I kind of relate somehow to the entertainment industry, even though I'm not performing that way. I also know that there are times for you, there's a creative time that you need to think about, create the ideas, how you're going to perform. What is it that you're going to do? And a lot of the struggle comes into getting stuck in that. I have no ideas, or I have some free time to finally, revamp the performance that I have or the things that I'm doing, but I just don't have the time or the energy, the brain energy to do that. And so I rather just chill on the couch, watch Netflix, play a video game, and then feel guilty about myself after that, because I'm just feeling that zombie state. And how great in states like that would be to feel ready to, with your mind active and your body feeling light and ideas flowing through you without you having to force those things. And this is all a chemical state of the body. The state of creativity is a state of different neurochemicals that provide the space for your brain to work and your ideas to happen. And they're all connected to the basic foundational practices of the body. So if your body is in a great chemical state because of the sleep that is good, because of the whole foods, because you move your body often, whenever you need to come up with ideas, poof, idea comes to you. And you feel in flow. How amazing it is to feel in flow, and your best ideas come to you whenever you want them. And then when you go to perform, you don't need a whole bunch of rituals to put yourself in the state that you are now. You're feeling your best because you're feeling your best all the freaking time. And then after a whole week of performance, you don't need a whole day or a whole 2 days of coping with the amount of energy drain, because your body recovers super fast. You can go for many performances in a row, and then the next day you're feeling great because your body is in a great state. And I think this is where I think that the synergy between what we do and the body that provides the possibilities for us to do what we do comes together. in the work of the brain, the work of the energy and the states that you have before you do it, as you do it, and after you do anything that you want to be doing. And so what I like to tie all of this together is, if there is one habit, because you said, I really hope that people take action on those things. And I think if there is one habit that I like to work with people in the very first beginning, it's not the habit of drinking more water, it's not the habit of sleeping a little earlier, or not the habit of eating more broccoli or not, but it's a meta habit. It's the habit that I call the body talk. It's the act of having a conversation with your body to create the space to analyze what is happening, what can be better, and how I can take action. Because if you create a weekly practice of reflection, of realizing, of going through the questions that we talked about today, with my current lifestyle, how likely I am to live longer, and well, what is the next thing that I should do or should stop doing, and why is it that hasn't happened yet? If I have this conversation every week, then I feed the energy, eventually create momentum for the action to take place. And it's very easy to come out of a conversation like today and say, all right, I'm gonna eat the freaking broccoli. And you do this for a week 1, and maybe do this for a week 2, and then week 3 you forget. But if you don't have the meta habit of analyzing your habits, analyzing the reflective part, it's very easy for these things to fade. So if I am giving priority to one practice, it will always be the awareness, reflective-based practice, because that keeps us looking at it. And eventually, that turns into action. And when it turns into action, this is when the magic happens. But for that to be in place, we want to keep looking and intentionally thinking about it. It makes sense?
Makes so much sense. And Ronan, thank you so much for coming and sharing this information. It's given me so much to go away and think about and implement. Going through this meta habit is now going to be part of my weekly routine. Instant drag and drop straight after this call. I'm going to be adding it all up and getting it all set up, ready to roll for this weekend. But with that said, how can we support you? How can our audience come and connect with you if they want to find out more about your work and everything that you've got going on?
Beautiful. You can find me on Instagram whenever I have updates. This is usually where I tell them, even though I'm not super active there, it's still the most active place that I'm online. And a lot of my work is published by Mindvalley. So I have courses on fitness, on nutrition, on fasting, on exercise, and a whole certification course on holistic health for people who are interested about this kind of things, all through the Mindvalley membership. So this is something, if you're more interested to say, okay, let's go deeper into that direction, then the Mindvalley platform will give you most of the work that I have as well.
Fantastic. And I'll say straight up, everything that's over on that platform, absolutely fantastic. Loving all of the courses, all of the quests, absolutely fantastic. But Ronan, thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing this absolute gold mine of information here. I'm really excited for everybody to actually hear about this.
It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and for opening space for this type of ideas to flow. Thank you so much.